Greetings and salutations. Thank you for lending an ear to The Voice of the Times this Sunday, November 15, 2020. For today's editorial, the judiciary should overhaul the electoral protest process. The Supreme Court warned people about commenting on the election protest filed by former Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., who ran in 2016 against Maria Leonor Leni Robredo for vice president, the position she now holds. The issue begs public comment, but we should respect the Supreme Court. Instead, we raise a general concern about the electoral protests that tend to drag on in the Philippines. Cases should be resolved quickly to ensure justice is served. Unless reforms shorten the process, drawn-out legal contests, especially those with higher stakes such as the presidency, can undermine democracy and heighten political tension. Hints of that threat can be observed in the United States these days. After a contentious presidential race, the U.S. seems headed toward a political crisis because of President Donald Trump's resistance to a peaceful transition and his lawsuits against the preliminary results. America's problem can be traced to the unofficial election outcomes in a few states, where margins were so close that mandatory recounts are to be expected. When counting officially ends, the presidential race may not even be tight, given that the margins are still increasing with some 3% of votes left to be counted. For now, though, the margins seem thin when the attention is focused on some states such as Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. As media reported, Mr. Trump has been claiming fraud without offering evidence, a cry echoed by some Republicans. America's saving grace has been its court's swift action. As of press time, none of Mr. Trump's legal challenges has prospered. In some instances, cases were just thrown out for lack of merit. Arguments are instead migrating to the court of public opinion, raising the specter of political instability. Even so, Americans remain confident that the issue will be resolved and that, eventually, a legitimate U.S. president will be sworn into office in January 2021. If a crisis is averted, the U.S. judicial system would deserve credit. Delayed and denied, sadly, the Philippine judicial process grinds slowly, even in electoral protests. One egregious case involved Noel Toti Carino, who ran for a congressional district in Pasig City in 2001. He argued that he was cheated and filed a lawsuit. A protracted legal battle ended favorably in 2004, allowing him to serve in Congress for just one day. He lost a re-election bid in the next polls. Sadly, this example is not unique in the Philippines. For Lauren Legarda's electoral protest in 2004, the following elections 3 years later came sooner than a court decision. Legarda, now a representative from Antique, ran for vice president against fellow broadcaster Noli de Castro. Feeling frustrated in 2007, she ran for the Senate instead of waiting for a final ruling. If an electoral protest were to occur in a presidential race in the Philippines, a long court fight could spark protests, perhaps even violence. Passions tend to run hot in presidential races, just like they do today in the US. The Philippines averted such a crisis in 2004 when Fernando Poe Jr. challenged the poll results that favored Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. The challenge lost steam after Mr. Poe, who was a reluctant presidential candidate in the first place, died later that year in December. The elections of Benigno Noynoy Aquino III in 2010 and of Rodrigo Duterte in 2016 were not controversial because they both won by large margins. Winning big seems to be the bomb for political anxieties that can later develop into instability and uncertainty. If that possibility happens in the presidential race in 2022 or beyond, the political disruption may be severe. Like what we see in Trump versus Joe Biden, election cases in this country should be decided fast to avert political disturbance. Despite the U.S. court's quick response, the polished image of America's democracy is tarnished by this embarrassment, as Mr. Biden mildly puts it. A similar situation in the Philippines could be a political powder keg. Close elections may be unavoidable in any democracy from time to time, but the passions stirred up between rival political camps could be contained by an impartial and speedy legal process. And that's the editorial for Sunday, November 15, 2020. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to our digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and listen to The Voice of the Times.